There's a fruit, and I will not tell you which one just yet, that researchers are now calling one of the most underestimated foods for muscle preservation in the aging body. It contains something that almost no other fruit on the planet contains in meaningful amounts. And when I tell you what it does at the cellular level, specifically to the switch that controls whether your muscles grow or continue to shrink, you'll understand exactly why I saved it for the end of this video. Stay with me, because that fruit alone may change the way you think about everything. My name is Dr. Vincent Halberg. I have spent the better part of my career studying the intersection of nutrition, cellular biology, and aging, specifically the biological mechanisms that determine whether the human body maintains its physical capacity or gradually surrenders it. And what I want to talk to you about today is something that I believe is one of the most consequential and most underaddressed health issues facing adults over the age of 50. Not heart disease, not blood sugar, not even cognitive decline, though all of those are serious. I am talking about the silent, accelerating loss of muscle tissue that begins in your 30s, accelerates through your 50s, and by your 60s has often already claimed somewhere between 15 and 30% of the muscle mass you had at your peak. That number stops most people when they hear it. 15 to 30%. Gone. Not because of anything dramatic, not because of an injury or an illness, simply because a set of biological processes that most people have never heard of began operating against them quietly, invisibly, for decades, and nobody told them what was happening or what they could do about it. So let me tell you, starting right now, the first thing you need to understand is that what most people call aging, the stiffness, the weakness, the fatigue, the difficulty with stairs, the way it takes both arms to push yourself out of a chair, is not simply the passage of time expressing itself on the body. It is a result of specific biological processes failing. Processes that have names, mechanisms that researchers can measure, study, and in many cases, meaningfully influence. The problem is not that your body has forgotten how to maintain muscle. The problem is that the conditions required for that maintenance are no longer being met. And in many cases, the body is actively working against itself without the person ever knowing why. Let me explain two of those mechanisms, because they are the foundation of everything I am going to show you today. The first is called anabolic resistance. Anabolic means building. Resistance means the signal is weakening. In a younger body, when you consume protein, when you move, when you place any kind of physical demand on your muscles, that demand triggers a cascade of biological signals that tell the muscle fiber to repair itself, reinforce itself, maintain itself. That cascade works efficiently. The signal is clear. The muscle responds. In an aging body, that signal progressively loses clarity. The same protein intake, the same physical effort, produces a diminished response in the muscle cell, not because the muscle cannot respond, but because the signal telling it to respond is being degraded before it arrives. The biological reception has weakened, and most people feel this as a vague sense that their body is no longer responding the way it used to, that the effort they put in is no longer producing the same result it once did. That feeling is real. It has a biological explanation, and it is one of the primary things that the fruits I am about to describe have been studied for their ability to address. The second mechanism is chronic low-grade inflammation. This is not the inflammation you feel after an injury, acute, visible, temporary. This is something far more insidious. It runs silently in the background of aging biology, generating a persistent inflammatory load that has a measurable destructive effect on muscle tissue over time. Researchers have a term for it, inflammaging. Inflammation plus aging merge into one word because they are, in the body, merge into one process. Chronic low-grade inflammation accelerates the breakdown of muscle fibers, impairs their ability to regenerate, and creates a biological environment in which the construction side of the muscle maintenance equation is perpetually falling behind the destruction side. Day after day, year after year, without any single moment where you feel the damage happening, until one day the accumulation becomes impossible to ignore. Now, here is where this becomes not just a problem, but a solvable one, because the same precision with which science has identified these mechanisms is the same precision with which researchers have identified specific natural compounds that interact with them, not pharmaceuticals, not synthetic interventions. Compounds found in foods, in fruit specifically, that have been studied for their ability to support the biological environment in which muscle maintenance is possible. And today, I am going to walk you through 5 of them. 5 fruits, each one operating on a different part of this biological picture, each one adding something the others do not. And the last one, the one I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, is the one I want you to wait for, because it does something none of the others can do. And it is the reason this list ends where it ends. The first fruit is tart cherry, not the sweet cherries you find in a fruit bowl. Tart cherry, the variety that is deep red, almost burgundy, with a sharpness that distinguishes it from its sweeter relatives. And that distinction matters because the compound profile of tart cherry is substantially different from sweet cherry, and it is that profile that makes it relevant to what we are discussing. Tart cherries are among the most concentrated natural sources of specific anthocyanins, pigmented polyphenol that have been studied extensively for their anti-inflammatory action. But what separates tart cherry in the context of muscle health is not simply that it reduces inflammation in a general sense. It is that research conducted specifically on muscle recovery has shown that tart cherry consumption meaningfully reduces the circulating markers of muscle damage and inflammation following physical exertion in older adults. We are talking about a measurable reduction in the proteins that appear in the bloodstream when muscle tissue is being broken down. Creatine kinase, interleukin 6, specific inflammatory cytokines that are chronically elevated in the aging body and that contribute directly to progressive muscle degradation I described a moment ago. There's also something that most people overlook when discussing tart cherry: its melatonin content. Tart cherry is one of the few foods with a meaningful concentration of naturally occurring melatonin, and melatonin's role in the body extends well beyond sleep. It is a potent antioxidant with demonstrated protective effects on mitochondrial function, and mitochondria, the energy-producing structures inside muscle cells, are among the first casualties of the aging process. Damaged mitochondria accumulate. Energy production inside the muscle cell declines. Strength and endurance diminish as a direct consequence. The melatonin compounds in tart cherry represent one of the quieter, but more important mechanisms by which this fruit supports the cellular environment in which muscle function is sustained. The second fruit is papaya. And I want to be very specific about what makes papaya relevant here, because it is not what most people assume. When people think of papaya and digestion, they think of it in a general sense. It is good for the gut. It helps with bloating. That is true, but it is a significant understatement of what is actually happening at a biochemical level. Papaya contains an enzyme called papain. Papain is a proteolytic enzyme, meaning it is specifically involved in the breakdown and processing of protein molecules. And here is why that matters profoundly for muscle health in older adults. One of the most consistently overlooked contributors to muscle loss with age is not inadequate protein intake. It is inadequate protein utilization. The body's ability to break down dietary protein into its component amino acids, absorb those amino acids through the intestinal wall, and deliver them to muscle tissue where they can be used for repair and maintenance. This entire process becomes progressively less efficient with age. Digestive enzyme production declines. Gut permeability changes. The efficiency of amino acid absorption drops. What this means in practical terms is that a person over 60 may be consuming what appears to be an adequate amount of protein and still experiencing muscle loss, because the protein is not being fully processed into a usable form. Papain from papaya directly addresses this inefficiency. It acts as a biological facilitator, helping break down protein more completely, improving the availability of amino acids for absorption, and supporting the digestive environment in which protein utilization is maximized. If the muscle is not receiving the amino acids it needs to maintain itself, no amount of effort at the gym or at the dinner table will fully compensate. Papaya helps ensure that what you consume actually reaches its destination. The third fruit is watermelon. And I want to approach this one from an angle that rarely gets the attention it deserves, because the conversation about watermelon in the context of health typically focuses on hydration and on an amino acid called citrulline. And while citrulline is genuinely important, and I will mention it briefly, there is a compound in watermelon that I believe is underappreciated even within research circles when it comes to muscle specifically. That compound is lycopene. Lycopene is a carotenoid, a fat-soluble pigment responsible for the red color of watermelon. and it is one of the most potent antioxidants found in any food. But its relevance to muscle health is not simply as a general antioxidant. What researchers have found is that lycopene has a specific protective effect against oxidative stress in muscle tissue, the kind of oxidative stress that is generated by physical exertion and that, when not adequately managed, contributes to muscle fiber damage, impaired recovery, and over time, accelerated loss of muscle mass. The muscle damage that accumulates from inadequate recovery is not dramatic or sudden. It is a slow, compounding effect of fibers that are broken down and not fully rebuilt, session after session, week after week, until the deficit becomes visible as weakness and reduced capacity. Lycopene from watermelon helps blunt that oxidative load. It reduces the cellular damage that occurs during and after physical activity, creates a more favorable environment for repair, and supports the recovery process that is essential for maintaining whatever muscle mass remains. And the citrulline I mentioned, it converts in the body to arginine, which drives nitric oxide production, which improves blood flow to muscle, which means better nutrient and oxygen delivery to exactly the tissue that needs it most. Watermelon addresses the muscle from two directions simultaneously. Very few foods do that. The fourth fruit is black grape, and this is where the science becomes particularly compelling, because what black grapes contain, and specifically the compound I am about to describe, operates at a level of cellular biology that is still being actively researched, and that represents one of the more exciting frontiers in our understanding of aging and muscle preservation. Black grapes are rich in resveratrol, and its closely related compound pterostilbene. These are polyphenol, but unlike many polyphenol that work primarily through antioxidant or anti-inflammatory pathways, resveratrol and pterostilbene have been shown to activate a family of proteins called sirtuins. Sirtuins are sometimes called longevity proteins, not as a marketing term, but as a functional description of their role in cellular biology. They are involved in DNA repair, in cellular stress response, in mitochondrial biogenesis, the creation of new mitochondria, and critically, in the regulation of muscle protein metabolism. Research has shown that sirtuin activation is associated with improved muscle fiber maintenance, reduced age-related muscle atrophy, and enhanced cellular resilience in the face of the inflammatory and oxidative stresses that are characteristic of aging biology. Resveratrol from black grapes has been shown in multiple studies to support sirtuin activity in a way that has measurable effects on the biological age of muscle tissue, not reversing years in a dramatic sense, but creating the cellular conditions in which muscle tissue is more likely to maintain its structural and functional integrity over time. Now I need to pause here, because if you've been listening carefully, you have heard me describe four distinct mechanisms: inflammation, protein utilization, oxidative stress recovery, and cellular longevity signaling. Each one is real. Each one is operating in your body right now, either working for you or against you depending on what your body is receiving. And the compounding effect of addressing all four simultaneously is substantially greater than addressing any one of them in isolation. This is exactly what I want you to understand before I tell you about the fifth fruit, because the fifth fruit is the one that brings a mechanism to this list that none of the others touch, a mechanism that sits at the very top of the biological hierarchy when it comes to whether your muscles grow, maintain, or continue to decline. But first, and I want to be direct with you about this, I need to tell you something important. The information in this video is valuable, but information alone is not the same as a solution. Consistently obtaining the right compounds in the right concentrations from these fruits every single day requires a level of dietary consistency that most people, including people who genuinely care about their health, struggle to maintain. Seasonal availability changes. Preparation methods affect compound concentrations. Life simply gets in the way. This is why, at the link below this video, in the description and in the first comment, there's a method that I want you to look at. It is a natural approach that brings together some of the most studied ingredients for muscle support, ingredients that target the same mechanisms we've been discussing, and others that go beyond what any individual fruit can deliver. People who have incorporated this into their routine describe it not as a dramatic event, but as a gradual return, a sense that the body is being supported at a level it had not been supported in years. Less effort to stand, less heaviness in the legs, a recovery from physical activity that feels more like it used to. This is not a claim. It is a consistent pattern reported by people who took the same biological information I am sharing with you now and decided to act on it. Look at that link. And then come back, because the fifth fruit is still waiting. And it is the most important thing I am going to tell you today. The fifth fruit is jackfruit. I know, for many of you, that name is unfamiliar. And that unfamiliarity is exactly the point. Jackfruit is the largest tree fruit in the world. It grows across South and Southeast Asia, parts of Africa and Latin America. It has been a dietary staple in those regions for centuries. And Western nutritional science is only now beginning to understand why populations that have consumed it regularly for generations show particular patterns of physical resilience and functional strength into older age. Here is what makes jackfruit unlike any other fruit on this list, and unlike almost any other fruit that exists. Jackfruit contains meaningful concentrations of essential amino acids. This is extraordinarily rare in a fruit. Fruits, almost without exception, are not significant sources of protein or amino acids. Jackfruit is the exception, and among those amino acids, it contains leucine, the amino acid that occupies a position of singular importance in the biology of muscle maintenance. Leucine is not just a building block. It is a biological trigger. It is the primary activator of a signaling pathway called mTOR, the mechanistic target of rapamycin. mTOR is the master switch of muscle protein synthesis. When mTOR is activated, the body enters an anabolic state, a state in which muscle fibers are being built and maintained. When mTOR signaling is insufficient, due to inadequate leucine, due to the anabolic resistance I described at the beginning of this video, due to the chronic inflammatory environment that characterizes aging, muscle protein synthesis falls. Breakdown exceeds construction. Loss continues. Leucine from dietary sources is the single most powerful natural activator of mTOR, more than exercise alone, more than any other amino acid, more than almost any other dietary variable studied in this context. And here is what makes this particularly significant in the context of aging. The anabolic resistance that older adults experience, the diminished cellular response to muscle-building signals, is in large part resistance to the mTOR pathway specifically. The threshold of leucine required to trigger adequate mTOR activation is higher in an older body than in a younger one. This means that older adults need more leucine more consistently to achieve the same muscle-maintaining signal that younger adults receive from smaller amounts. A fruit that provides leucine is therefore not simply a nutritious addition to the diet. It is a direct biological intervention at the exact point where the aging body's muscle maintenance system is most compromised. No other fruit on this list does this. No other common fruit does this at all. Jackfruit is genuinely unique in this regard. And when you combine that leucine-driven mTOR activation with the anti-inflammatory support of tart cherry, the protein utilization enhancement of papaya, the oxidative stress protection of watermelon, and the sirtuin activation of black grape, you are addressing the biology of muscle loss from 5 distinct and complementary directions simultaneously. That combination is not accidental. It is architecture. The architecture of a body that is being given what it needs to resist a process that would otherwise continue to claim its strength, its stability, and eventually its independence. And now I want to bring this full circle. Because the reason I walked you through all 5 of these fruits, the mechanism behind each one, the science that supports each claim, is not simply to give you a shopping list. It is to give you a framework, a way of understanding your body's needs that goes beyond the surface level and reaches the biological reality of what is actually happening inside your muscle tissue right now. Because here is the truth. What you do in the next weeks and months matters more than most people realize. The biological window during which the body remains responsive to nutritional and lifestyle support is real. It is not unlimited. The longer the mechanisms of muscle loss operate without being addressed, the longer the inflammation runs unchecked, the longer the anabolic resistance goes unsupported, the longer the mTOR switch sits understimulated, the harder it becomes to reverse the trajectory. Not impossible, but harder, meaningfully harder. The people who act now, who choose to support their muscle biology while the body still has a capacity to respond, are the people who are most likely to be standing on their own, walking without assistance, living in their own homes on their own terms, 5 and 10 years from now. That is not a dramatic claim. It is a predictable outcome of a body that has been consistently supported versus a body that has been left to manage an accelerating biological deficit without help. At the link below this video, in the description and in the first comment, you'll find the natural method I mentioned earlier. I want to be clear about what it represents. It is not a replacement for the dietary principles we discussed today. It is a practical solution to the consistency problem that diet alone cannot fully solve. It brings together natural ingredients, including compounds that go beyond these 5 fruits, that target anabolic resistance, inflammatory load, cellular energy production, and muscle protein synthesis with a concentration and reliability that food intake alone cannot guarantee. It is, in the most precise sense I can offer, a way of ensuring that the biological support your muscles need is arriving every day, consistently, in amounts that matter. Your body has been sending you signals. The heaviness in your legs, the effort it takes to rise from a chair, the way physical activity leaves you more depleted than it used to. Those signals are not complaints. They are requests. They are your muscle biology asking for what it needs to function. The question is not whether you will eventually respond to them. The question is whether you will respond now, while responding still makes the difference you need it to make. The link is below. Read what is there, and make the decision your body has already been asking you to make.